Before we get started with our presentation, I'd just like to quickly talk about Dr. Krishnan's research team, which has partnered with the amazing support group here. Our research operates out of Emory University, and we focus on patient-centered outcomes research. So some topics that we study include young stroke and mild stroke, comparing effectiveness of rehab following stroke across various settings, the management of caregiver burden following neurological conditions, and the prevention and early detection of secondary complications following stroke. Okay, so I'd like to now introduce our guest speaker, Krystal Merrells. Now, Krystal is a storyteller and dietitian in Canada who has had multiple concussions. Combining her personal experience with brain injury with over a decade of professional experience as a dietitian, she helps people with TBI find healing with food and nutrition. She focuses on helping fellow TBI survivors build the confidence to meal plan, cook, and eat without restrictive diets. She believes food can be healing in more ways than one, and Krystal is looking forward to sharing with you a different approach to nutrition for brain injury that helps feed the brain and nourish the mind and soul. Now, before we start, I'd like to remind everyone to please mute your mic during the presentation, unless, of course, you have a question or comment, and this will just help us prevent any unnecessary noise or feedback. So I will now hand the mic over to you, Krystal. Thank you so much for coming.
Yay. Thank you. Thank you for having me here. And yeah, I'm in Canada. I'm in Ottawa, which is the capital. If you didn't know, the capital's not Toronto. Lots of people think it is, including people who live in Toronto. Anyways, no, but anyways, yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, I've got a presentation for you, but I'm hoping I do ask questions during it. So, don't hesitate to share, but also don't feel like you have to share if you don't want to. So I am gonna go over and share my screen, which I have the power to do. Okay, here we go. And I'm gonna move this over here. And I'm gonna do this. Okay, first of all, did I share my screen successfully? You can give me a nod or a wave or whatever you want to do. Yeah, thumbs up. Thank you. Okay, so, and thanks for the introduction, Chris. Yes, I've had multiple concussions, and that's how I came about to do this work. And being in the community, I kind of saw that, yeah, nutrition advice focuses a lot on what not to eat, and I want to present something a bit more pleasant than that. So we're gonna go over, yeah, different tools to help you out today. So this is for you if you've ever kind of wondered, like diet is important for brain health, but I just don't know where to start. Or if I've had a lot of people say to me, like, I'm just wondering, am I missing anything in my recovery? Or people want to make changes to their diet, but they want to do it without being completely stressed out. We do not need more stress. And people often ask me, like, what is a balanced diet anyways? Like, how do I eat for brain and gut health and all that jazz? So people also say to me, I try to research this stuff on my own, but it's all conflicting the moment I start to look up information. One thing tells me not to eat carbs, then I read another thing telling me not to eat protein, and I don't even know what to do anymore. This is a direct quote from someone who came to me once. How do I filter out all the inaccurate nutrition information? And, I would do this all myself, but I just can't. The injury makes it hard. So give me a hand raise if this feels like you. I will say that my approach to nutrition might be a bit different than what you're expecting. So I will say this. In this presentation today, I'm not going to give you a list of what not to eat. I'm going to focus instead on what to eat. Nutrition isn't something that we can really change overnight. So if I had a magic bullet, I would give it to you, but I have yet to find it. And I'm not going to give you any complicated diets or diet plans today. So, brain injury, we're dealing with a lot and it affects life in many different ways. And so how I thought we could go about looking at different ways to approach this with nutrition is with what I like to call some brain injury buddies. So these aren't real people, but just sort of a conglomerate of different people I've met over my time working in this area. So our first brain injury buddy we're meeting today is Beth. Beth goes by the pronouns she, her. She has dealt with irritable bowel syndrome, so like gut problems, even before her injury. And, she was doing her graduate degree. She really liked camping and hiking and all that stuff. But since her injury, she's had lots of headaches. She's been low energy. She's had lots of sensitivity to light and noise. She can't study or do like cognitively demanding tasks the same way she could before. She's really struggling with physical activity and her gut problems are worse. Our second brain injury buddy today is Miguel, and he goes by the pronouns he, him. He's a financial advisor, and some people would describe him as a gym guy. Before his injury, he kind of saw himself, or people would describe him as like a healthy lifestyle enthusiast. But since his injury, he's been having trouble concentrating, having trouble planning. He has some memory issues. He keeps trying to go back to work, but like he's having setbacks from just like too much too soon. And he's tried a lot of therapies, he's tried a lot of supplements, and he's still searching. And then our third brain injury buddy today is Janelle. Also goes by the pronoun she, her. She's a mom with one kid in college. Now, before her brain injury, she's a professional photographer. She's the one, everyone knows her as the host of family dinners, and she's really involved with her book club. But after her injury, she is quite low energy. She's having trouble sleeping, her mood is up and down, she's having anxiety that she never had before. And since her injury, she's also noticed a change in her body as well. She's had some weight gain and people are making unsolicited comments about it. So if you want to pop in the chat and just let me know, do any of these people, do you resonate with any one of these brain injury buddies? Do you resonate with Janelle or Miguel or Beth? Any part of their stories? Anywho, so a lot of times I've found that, people have come to me and they've said, so far, the advice I've been given in terms of nutrition is just someone saying to me, like, do this diet. And something I've noticed over my years of working as a dietitian is that whenever this happens, someone's like, oh, just so did you do that diet I recommended? And often that diet isn't an appropriate recommendation. And the result is the person wasn't able to do it. And so they say, no, it's just me. I just have to do it. Like it's my fault. And I've seen this lead to a lot of shame, a lot of people feeling like they failed, when really the advice failed them. And sometimes I feel like the people who are giving diet advice are the same people who, when you say, like, oh, cooking exhausts me, it's just so hard for me to do since my injury. And they're like, oh, it's the same for me, and I don't even have a brain injury. Don't worry, it's normal. I don't know if you've had that experience. I definitely have, in which case, my thoughts are more like explicit language. I'm being frustrated with it. So the problem here is that whatever nutrition plan that is going to work for you is one that considers how your brain injury affects you. So let's go back to our brain injury buddies here. So Beth, for example, has sensitivity to light and noise. Well, that makes it hard to go get groceries or possibly even to eat with others. I had a client today who was saying they had, a lot of sensitivity to noise that kind of popped up today. So they had to like wear earplugs at their dinner table to be able to eat with their family. Beth's cognitive difficulties also makes it like near impossible to follow a recipe. I know for myself, it like blew my mind, no pun intended, that I had these recipes that I would, that I had made so many times before. But after my injury, I opened up that recipe book and I would read a line, turn to the stove to do the thing, and have forgotten it on the way from reading the line to turning. And so that was a very humbling experience. Yeah, and cognitive difficulties makes it difficult for Beth to manage any other healthcare issues she might have. And in this case, she's dealing with those gut problems. Okay, what about Miguel? Well, Miguel has trouble with memory. So for him, that's making it difficult to remember to take his medications and supplements, especially if he has like a lot on board. On top of that, he has difficulty with planning. So making a weekly menu is very challenging. And if he's been given like very restrictive diet advice with a bunch of rules, it's made it hard for him and his partner to follow through. And then there's Janelle. Janelle has low energy. That I often see relates to like losing a routine. And I mean, it's not just that. I mean, anything that comes into our life and flips our life upside down, it can really mess with our routine. And sometimes that comes with skipping meals. Mood and anxiety issues. This can go either way. In this example with Janelle, it's leading her to eat to cope and then go through this cycle of I'm eating to cope with my emotions and then I feel bad about it. So then I restrict because people keep telling me to watch my weight when I didn't ask for that. And then, the cycle continues. There's one question I ask all the people I talk with and all my clients that I work with, which is, what is the particular problem you're trying to solve with food and nutrition here? And a lot of the time people will say to me, well, I just want to know what and how much to eat. Or I just want to know the right foods for my brain. So again, you can like raise your hand if you're like, yep, I'm on board with that. And something I notice is that, food is about so much more than just what we eat. And when I dig deeper, what people are really wanting is, I want energy to be more active again. I miss that. I want a plan I can follow long term. I've had a number of people come to me and say like, this injury, it just threw my life upside down and I'm having a hard time with food. And I don't want to follow any diets anymore. I just want something that's going to last me for a long time, that's sustainable. Lots of people ask me for easy meals so that they can focus on other things. I love food. And it's my job. So obviously I talk about it and I think about it every single day. But not everybody needs to. You have other things to do in life. So, nutrition shouldn't take up all hours of your day. People also want to feel good in their body. I got people tell me they want food that's not boring. And I've also had a number of people come to me with gut issues where the gut issues have caused them to like cut out and limit a bunch of foods and gotten to the point where they're afraid to eat. They don't know what to eat and they don't want to trigger any of their gut symptoms because of it. Okay. Get your fingers ready for the chat or unmute yourself because I have a question. Imagine yourself completely happy and healthy. What would you be able to do? Okay, follow-up question to that. So now, how would you, completely happy and healthy, how would you eat? What would eating look like to you? Awesome. The reason I asked this, because I'm gonna call back to this later, is that nobody has ever answered this question saying, you know, I want to eat restricted. I want to be more isolated with my food. I want to be stressed and worried about it. I'd be happy and healthy eating strict food rules or eating different from my family and friends. And this is a piece of nutrition that often gets missed because whatever eating plan is going to be best for you is going to be in line with the things that make you feel good. That's part of ultimately your like ideal, happy and healthy self. So people tell me they want good nutrition because they want to have choice. They want to be the best version of themselves. They want to have energy, inspire others, and they want to follow their passion. So how do we do this with food and nutrition? All of the work I do, I have based it off of these 3 pillars that I find key to like a happy and healthy person with good nutrition. So the first pillar is kind of what everyone thinks of and what they expect I do, which is nutrition therapy. So that's like looking at specific foods, that's looking at specific eating patterns, looking at nutrients that might be missing and how can we change that. So nutrition therapy. But that alone isn't enough to help a person. All the nutrition therapy in the world won't make a difference if we can't make it sustainable. If we can't make that habit change doable for the person. And even more so, what I would call the cherry on top is what makes this even better is the 3rd pillar, which I call compassionate nutrition, which is the idea of how can we do nutrition in a way that is as kind as possible. I see a lot of people and a lot of advice that makes nutrition into this like punishing thing, right? Like, well, if you eat this way, then you'll be able to have the chocolate. It's not very kind or compassionate. So when we start adding this element in, it makes all the difference in the world. So let's take a look at how to actually use these things now with our brain injury buddies. So with Beth here, I'm going to zoom in on the difficulty she's having managing IBS. So here's my top tip number 1, which is talking about nutrition to help heal and support the brain and gut. So this is that nutrition, therapy kind of pillar. Now, if I was working with Beth, I would, dig deeper to be like, is it really IBS? IBS is an umbrella term, and we want to get to the root to the problem. But until then, one of the great things you can do for your gut is to get more fiber, and in specific, more soluble fiber. Just a fun fact, we dietitians refer to fiber as the F word in nutrition. Anyways, we could use some funner terminology. Okay, so fiber. Seriously, lots of problems, lots of health problems would be solved by getting more fiber in the diet. So this number might not mean anything to you, and that's okay. But the total amount that we're supposed to get on average is 25 grams a day. Most people in North America get half that or less than half of that. And that is a problem. We know that soluble fiber, even specifically, so there's fiber, there's like insoluble fiber and soluble fiber. Soluble fiber just means it dissolves in water. So it's what makes your food gooey. So if you think of oats or oatmeal, like when you cook it, they get kind of gelatinous. That's the soluble fiber that's doing that. So when we get a good amount of soluble fiber in our diet, we know that that lowers cholesterol. In fact, we know that with like nutrition, we can bring down someone's cholesterol levels if they have high cholesterol levels. And then in gut health, it helps with both too much pooping and not pooping enough. Wow. Did you think we were going to talk about poop today? Okay, talking about soluble fiber, just to give you, soluble fiber, fiber in total. Obviously, beans are a really great source. Also, things like avocados, Brussels sprouts, sweet potatoes or yams, and things like oranges and figs. Now, when we start to increase fiber in the diet, I don't know if you've noticed, but we have also increased color. We've also increased color variety. And what that does is the color in plant-based foods comes from different nutrients. So when we're eating more colors, we're eating more of a variety of nutrients that help heal our brain and our gut. All in all, when we include more fiber in the diet, it helps shift this balance. Has anyone been hearing the term inflammatory and anti-inflammatory being thrown around? But basically, a lot of health issues, and we're talking about, brain injury, there's thought to be excess inflammation in the body and in the brain. Inflammation is just your immune system. It's not a bad thing. Inflammation is the reaction to an illness in the body. But the problem is that in these health conditions, the immune system overreacts. It's like, have you ever tried to fix something and then it wasn't working, and so you tried harder to fix it and harder to fix it until you broke it? Has that ever happened to you? Or to someone you know? My dad is classic for doing that. He's like, no, I'll get it. Anyways, that is what inflammation is. It's like trying too hard to fix a problem that it actually makes the problem worse. And so there's a number of things that contribute to this. And when we talk about food, typically a low fiber diet contributes to that excess inflammation. And that's kind of our typical Western North American diet, is just like that. So we want to tip the balance, and we can do that by including more of these high fiber foods. When we look at this in terms of like the overall eating pattern, and Cindy, this is where I'm answering your question, is that when we talk about balanced eating, we want to get a little bit of everything, like as if you were at a buffet and you wanted to get a little bit of each section. So for the brain and gut, we need some essential fats. So nuts and seeds, fish, and things like oils and avocado, okay? Typically in our North American diet, we just get less of this. And so we help tilt the balance by getting a bit more. Fruit, berries, whole grains is another category. It gives us energy. Carbohydrate is our brain and body's favorite source of energy. And these foods just provide a lot of nutrients that we don't get from other foods. Then we got any protein-based foods, whether it's coming from meat or plants. These here really cool in the brain. Our messengers in the brain, so neurotransmitters, things like serotonin, if you've heard that before, serotonin, the happy chemical in your brain. Those are all built from the building blocks of proteins. So it's really cool to see like how our food breaks down and then like transforms into these things that our brain and body needs. And then there's balancing with what some call antioxidants. These are things like your vegetables, your teas, your spices and herbs. These provide a lot of things that, again, help tip that balance. Okay, so at this point, if anyone wants to share, what is like one food from here that you actually like? Okay. All right. So that was the first pillar. Now we're coming into the second pillar. So we're going to use our brain injury buddy, Miguel, to help out with that. So for Miguel, planning is an issue, organizing, all of those like executive functioning, that's what some people call. So what can we do about that? So top tip number 2, choose habit changes that work with your prefrontal cortex. Okay, what do I mean by that? Prefrontal cortex. I threw that in there to sound fancy. So that part of the brain is kind of at the front. And especially in concussion, there can be this whiplash effect where that part of the brain gets affected because it like hits the inside of the skull. But in other brain injuries, you know, that could be affected too. And basically what that is where we do all the planning and problem solving. So tell me this, have you ever been like super frustrated or angry or sad and you're trying to solve a problem and you just can't? And you just can't. And you keep like hacking away at it and you're trying so hard, but you're just getting more and more frustrated. Has that ever happened to anyone here? Like, I know it's happened to you guys. It's happened to everybody. And the reason for that is because when we are either in, you know, a state of like extreme frustration, extreme sadness or trauma, that organized problem solving planning part of the brain isn't working as well. So yeah, so how do we circumvent that? Well, if we want to make diet changes that are sustainable and meaningful to us, best way to do that is to root them in your priorities and values. What do I mean by that? So your priorities and values are your non-negotiables in life. They are the things that are the most important to you, that no one and nothing can take away. So some people might say that's my family. Some people might say that's, you know, like living a simple life. For me, it's like the outdoors and creativity and dogs. Dogs are very important to me. So why does this matter? Well, I'll give you an example. I had a client who, I was working with, and they came to me one day and they were like, Krystal, I keep hearing about this diet. It's very restrictive. Should I do it? And I was like, okay, well, we discussed kind of the pros and cons, but at the end of the day, I said, can we go back to your priorities and values? What's important to you? And this client said, well, it was, talking about they order what's called CSA boxes here. Anyways, it's from farmers. So you can order, and every month you get like a box from a farmer of all the different like foods that are available at that time. It was important to them to cook their cultural meals with their kids. And it was important to them to go like apple picking in the fall and strawberry picking in July. And so I said, okay. I said, and with this diet that you asked me about, can you do those things? Can you eat everything that's in those farmers' boxes? Can you go apple picking and make the pies you want to make, and go strawberry picking and make the jam you want to make with your kids? And can you eat the traditional foods that you want to pass down to your kids? And this person was like, no, I can't. And I was like, okay, so what do you think? Is this diet worth it to you? And she said, no, absolutely not. So whenever you're confronted with kind of like a diet question, think about your priorities and values, because 100% I have seen so much diet advice fail and even just be like upsetting to people because it goes against these things. All right, last pillar, Janelle. So if you remember, Janelle lost her routine with skipping meals, but what we're going to zone in on here is this eating to cope. This is something that happens a lot. And there is no right or wrong here. Sometimes eating to cope with difficult thoughts and feelings is potentially someone's best coping mechanism. Doesn't mean it always has to be, but sometimes that is the best option. So we just want to look at, well, how can we give other options? So my top tip number 3 is to take listening to your body to the next level. Now, if I was working with Janelle, because there's so much skipping meals and whatnot, I'd be asking for blood work for nutrient deficiencies. And something that comes up a lot post-brain injury, post-trauma, is actually disordered eating. And so that's something that I would screen for and then advocate for this client. But if there is no active eating disorder, then one of the things we can do is true mindful eating. Has anybody here heard the term mindful eating before? No? Has anybody here heard about mindfulness and the practice of mindfulness? Yeah, it's kind of a buzzword these days. I remember, like, I learned mindfulness through my own therapies and through my psychologist, actually, who was the one who taught me it. And the first time I said to somebody I was doing mindfulness work, they rolled their eyes at me. They were like, ugh, if I hear one more thing about mindfulness. Anyways, I don't know, but it's kind of a popular thing. But so mindful eating is a branch of mindfulness. And when we look at what it truly is, as opposed to kind of the pop culture definition, it can be quite helpful. So mindful eating at its core is reconnecting with your body's hunger and fullness cues without judgment. Very important, that last part, without judgment. I find that, we go through this tough time with this brain injury, And then recovery can be really, really challenging. And then sometimes, and I know this happened to me, you know, you're trying to do the best you can, and then for whatever reason, you can't do the thing you need to do. And then I would beat myself up about it and be like, oh, God, like, why didn't I do the thing? How, you know, I'm doing these therapies. Why don't I do it? Why don't I stick with it? So the core of mindfulness is observing what's happening without judgment. Because when we take the judgment away, we're better able to see our options and better able to do the thing we actually want to do. So I love this quote from someone. This was actually just like a follower on Instagram who had said to me, you know, eating becomes an act of self-love when you listen to your body and feed it without shame. This is the next level up in terms of how food can be healing. So if it's right for you, we're going to do just like a little exercise. If it's not right for you, don't worry about it. But this here is to build something called interoceptive awareness. Ooh, another fancy word I threw in there. So what this is interoceptive awareness is how aware you are of the sensations in your body in different cues, like hunger and fullness. Now, for some people, we're going to do what's called the heartbeat detection test, which is going to be trying to locate our heartbeat. Now, for some people, feeling their body is actually could be very unpleasant. So if this is unpleasant for you, then don't worry about it, okay? And if not, if you want to give it a try, let's do it. So all you need to do is, whether you're sitting, laying down, standing, it doesn't matter. Just either you can close your eyes if you like, or just kind of look down kind of at nothing. And without feeling for your pulse, without moving your hands or anything, see if you can just locate your heart within your chest. See if, without touching your chest or touching your pulse, can you find the rhythm of your heart? Can you feel it beating? Is there a right or wrong to this? No, there is no right or wrong. So some people might be able to feel it. Some people might not. If you were able to like feel any part of it, feel free to drop in the chat and tell me what you experienced, or unmute yourself. But I would wager that not a lot of people at first try might be able to do this. Why? Because we are, you know, we have a lot of things in our environment that are very distracting, and it's not everybody practices, or it's not very often that we stop and try to feel this. So, excuse me. Why did we do this? Well, this applies to your appetite. I've met a number of people who post-injury and even, you know, without a brain injury, but just going through a difficult time in life. I mean, when you're super stressed, what happens? Are you hungry? Not often. And when that stress is prolonged, then your appetite might suffer as a result. So one way to get your appetite back, which is super key, if you want to know, like, how much should I be eating? Ideally, we would get you to a place where your awareness of your body cues is so top notch that your body cues can tell you, you're hungry, you should eat now, and hey, you're full, you should maybe stop, right? Mindful eating isn't eat when you're hungry and stop when you're full, because sometimes you have to eat when you're not hungry, and sometimes you will keep eating when you're feeling full, because that chocolate cake is just once in a lifetime, and you might not be back at that restaurant anytime soon. So if you have problems with appetite cues, if you don't feel hunger, if you have no appetite, you can try to sense your appetite, but you can actually build your appetite back by trying to sense other things, by working on practicing sensing your heartbeat, by practicing other sensations like stopping, slowing down, and noticing your breath and what parts of your body moves when you breathe. Anything that brings that attention and awareness inside, if you increase one awareness, it increases others as well. Don't worry if you couldn't feel it. It's like totally normal. Okay. So in this here is that compassionate piece of nutrition. How can we do this in a kind way? And I put a picture of a dog here because, one, I love dogs, and two, because they are like the best at mindful eating. They let you know when they're hungry. All right. But the real challenge is moving from knowing to doing. I think this is with any big habit change in life, whether you're getting back to exercise, if anyone has like tried to start like meditating, or whether they're in any big lifestyle change, knowing is one piece, but actually making a step and doing something is another. So if you're interested in more about the doing and what steps you might be able to take, then I do offer a TBI Nutrition Masterclass. This is like a no stress guide to go further in your recovery with nutrition. And I do offer people like free calls. So if you're like, I'm not sure where I am at with my nutrition, and I don't even know exactly what my problem is, I do this call with people where I have this series of questions to help them kind of narrow down where the issue is and where their next step might be, whether that's with me or whether that's with somebody else. So so I'll give you my link to my website. This is the link for the free call, but my website also has a plethora of different resources. So if you wanted to check out more, here's my website. I personally had a hard time with screens in my recovery, so every page is recorded in audio, and it's my voice. It's not a robot. And yeah, my story is here. My cake on my 3-year anniversary, I had a brain ice cream cake made. Yeah. It was good. That was 3 years ago. I recently just passed my 6-year anniversary. And my blog, where the last post was about nausea and vomiting. And in terms of that question about inflammation, anti-inflammatory, I got an article here on 3 simple ways to eat anti-inflammatory without cutting out a bunch of foods. So, yeah.